If you're noticing yourself having a hard time sitting down and working on your business, this could be why. Another example of how fear pops up for ADHD women entrepreneurs is saying yes to everyone else. And this may not seem like fear. It's like, no, I'm just helping people. I'm a helper. I like to help people. And a lot of times when I really go deep with women, and this is women in my private therapy practice, this is women that I work with as an ADHD success coach, this is women in my program. But when you get deeper into what people are saying yes for when they really can't prioritize this other person's stuff, like they already have a full plate and they're saying yes, a lot of times the root cause there is fear of someone being mad at you or fear that they won't like you or fear that you're not helpful or valuable or whatever, or that they'll stop asking and seeing that you have value. Hi, I'm Jen Barnes, and you're about to experience how to ditch the old ways of doing things, embrace your neurodivergence, learn tips and tricks to function optimally, and love yourself, neurodivergence and all. Welcome to the Self-Loved Woman podcast. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about a super important topic, and it's how to spot when inner ADHD obstacles are holding you back. This is super important because as ADHD women, we already have enough things kind of getting in the way, or I don't even want to say getting in the way, but enough challenges that we have to learn how to work with that we certainly don't need anything extra holding us back. And so this is a really important topic to me, something I spend a lot of time teaching in my program, and something that if you want to delve in deeper, I'm going to tell you at the end of this episode how you can do some work with me for free. So let's dig into it. One of the biggest inner obstacles that a lot of ADHD women have is fear. But the thing is a lot of times we can be like, well, I'm not afraid, or I've even been there. Well, I'm like, I'm not afraid, but the fear will still sometimes pop up in sneaky ways. Like sometimes we're aware that we're afraid and we're like, I don't know if I can do that. That seems kind of scary or whatever. But sometimes we don't think we're afraid, but there's these external signals that probably the underlying issue is fear. Now, I want to be clear, as we're talking about this, I am well aware of how our ADHD brains are wired. And I know that sometimes the challenges that we're going to talk about today can truly be ADHD traits, right? It can be some of how our brain is wired. It's just that a lot of times, if you are using ADHD strategies, ADHD-specific strategies, you've set your life up, your business up to be in alignment with living and working the ADHD way, and you're still having a hard time, there's a good chance that it's one of 4 or 5 underlying kind of invisible ADHD obstacles. And today we're going to talk about the one called fear. And fear, sometimes we can feel it in our body. We can feel that fight or flight response, or we can feel a shutdown response where we're like buzzing on a motor, although that can be tough to tell with ADHD because I think a lot of us feel like we're always on a motor. Or we can feel shut down, like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything. And those for sure are indicative of fear. And sometimes fear doesn't always look that extreme. So we're going to talk about these different ways that you might be able to spot that what you're actually being held back by is fear. So you might struggle to start or complete tasks that have to do with putting yourself out there. So what does that mean? It could be posting on social media. It could be putting a CTA, a call to action on your social media, like asking people to follow or share or download a freebie from you or exchange a DM with you, right? It could be afraid of doing that. It could be afraid of making offers where you share what it is that you're selling or promoting. It could be even like having a hard time inviting people to a workshop you're doing, to an event, to your email list. And so this kind of fear tends to pop up when what we fear is rejection. And sometimes, for sure, it can be something else, but A lot of us with ADHD really struggle with rejection. And, you've heard RSD. Everyone talks about RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, and it's real. It, in my opinion, stems from the frequent criticism, correction, and negative comments that we get and got growing up about our ADHD and how we need to not talk so much. We need to not dominate the conversation. We need to listen better or pay attention or focus or whatever of the 8 million things we got criticized for or still get criticized for are. And that made us really sensitive because when someone criticizes us in the present, usually it's triggering something from the past or probably some things from the past and all of that constant criticism. And so it can feel just like a raw wound that just like a scab that keeps getting picked over and over. It's kind of a disgusting metaphor, but right? It's just like the scab that keeps getting picked at over and over. And so it can hurt when we get rejected. And so that fear is really valid. But if you're having a hard time putting yourself out there and you're like, oh, I just can't do it because of my ADHD, it might be fear. And then it might be time to figure out like, okay, I got to work with this fear. Because no matter what skills you apply, if fear is the true barrier, they're not going to work. And so we'll get into a little bit more how we can work with this. But I want to talk about other ways that fear shows up in ADHD women entrepreneurs. So it might be that you catch yourself saying that you don't have time or space for your business. And before I go into this one, I want to say, like, here's the deal. This is only if your business is a true top priority for you. There are some people, like I know I work with a lot of moms, people who, are just trying to make ends meet and support their kids or whatever. And building your business on top of all of that may not be the top priority. And it may be true that you really don't have a ton of time to spend on your business, right? And I get it. So this is not that. This is if your business is a priority for you and you're having a hard time prioritizing it because there's other things that are shiny and distracting. And you're like, oh, I should look into that instead of actually doing the thing that you need to do that day for your business. Right? And listen, we come by this honestly. First of all, we're very good at distracting ourselves, and we've probably learned how to use distraction to deal with our fear, right? Like, oh, if I just, distract myself, I can avoid dealing with the big, hairy, scary thing. But the problem is if your business is a top priority for you, then you need to do the stuff for your business or you won't have a business, right? And that's not like a threat or anything, but it's just the reality is like, oh, if you need your business to run and it's a top priority for you, then it's essential to find that time and space for it. And if you're like really struggling to do that for yourself, there's a good chance that fear could be beneath it. And again, we'll talk about how do we work with that fear. It could be that you could use ways of working and living the ADHD way, and we'll talk about that in the free thing that's coming up soon. I'm really excited. But sometimes the root of it is just this fear of putting yourself out there. So if you're noticing yourself having a hard time sitting down and working on your business, this could be why. Another example of how fear pops up for ADHD women entrepreneurs is saying yes to everyone else. And this may not seem like fear. It's like, no, I'm just helping people. I'm a helper. I like to help people. And a lot of times when I really go deep with women, and this is women in my private therapy practice, this is women that I work with as an ADHD success coach, this is women in my program. But when you get deeper into what people are saying yes for when they really can't prioritize this other person's stuff, like they already have a full plate and they're saying yes, a lot of times the root cause there is fear of someone being mad at you or fear that they won't like you or fear that you're not helpful or valuable or whatever, or that they'll stop asking and seeing that you have value. And I get it. Like, I get how we got there. I know for me, one of the ways that I would kind of like balance out the challenges of my ADHD that other people would complain about to me as a child was by saying yes to people and being of value, being a people pleaser. Because when I did that, then if I talked too much or interrupted, people were like, "Oh, well, that's just Jen. She's super helpful though." Right? Like it was like that kind of thing. Or I don't know about you, but my report cards always said, Jen gets really good grades. That's excellent. She could work on talking less, right? Whereas the kids who talked a lot, what the teachers may have viewed as too much, but didn't get good grades, got much different kind of commentary. And so those of us who learned how to mask through people pleasing and overachievement may have done so out of fear or to protect ourselves on some level. And we may continue to do it out of fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of people being mad at us and then not trusting that we can handle that, or fear of people's like, oh, well, we tell them no, right? Like sometimes that can be enough to throw us for a loop. And so if you're saying yes to everyone else, then you're not going to have enough space to say yes to your business. And that can be another sign of fear and how it shows up. You may also notice decision paralysis. You may have a really, really hard time making decisions for your business. And that can look like figuring out what website platform to use. Like if you're going to create a website and you're like, I don't know, should I use Squarespace? Should I use Weebly? Should I use an all-in-one system? Should I do WordPress? Whatever. And it might be really hard to get yourself to decide. And some of that can be because you're afraid of making the wrong choice. It can also be in a way to avoid the hairy, scary things that you're struggling to get yourself to do, right? I swear with ADHD, we can be master avoiders if we need to be. It's truly a skill that protects us. It's just that sometimes it works against us, especially when we're trying to build a business that's meaningful and prosperous. So this decision paralysis is real, and I get why we do it because we can be afraid of making the wrong choice. Sometimes when we make the quote unquote wrong choice, it can cost us more in time or energy, neither of which a lot of us when we're starting out in business really have. And with ADHD, we need to do things simply because when things are overly complex, like if we choose the wrong website platform and it's overly complex, that could be really, really hard for our ADHD. And it's hard enough to get ourselves to do stuff that we don't want to put a bunch of effort into something and find out like, oh yeah, that's not going to work for me because it can feel like such a waste of focused energy. And so I get the whole decision paralysis thing. We come by it honestly. And a lot of times, one of the ways that we avoid is through this fear. And it can get in the way of us doing the things we actually need to do for our business. Another way this shows up is its close cousin, quick decisions. This one that I tend towards, like some people can go down research rabbit holes and decision making, I don't know, like trees, whatever it is that you don't know because I'm not very good at making thoughtful decisions. And there's people like me who are like, I'm just going to do this. And we just do it. And we're like, okay. But then we pick something that maybe we should have researched just even a little more, but then end up spending a lot of time and energy fixing it, which is another way that fear shows up. Because if we're like afraid we're going to choose wrong, we just choose without making a decision. We're like, I mean, I didn't really think about it. So what can I expect, right? So it's another way that we're avoiding that fear, but also avoiding showing up in our business and putting ourselves out there. Because here's the thing, when we start doing all these things, eventually what happens is we have to engage with an audience. We have to start testing our messaging, testing the service that we offer, and testing the different problems that our audience has to see if we really are hearing what they need. And doing that is vulnerable. It's scary. And so there are so many reasons why we would try and avoid that. And these are ways we do it. Right? One more is perfectionism. So you might catch yourself like, oh, I can't put that out there. It's not perfect yet, or it's not good enough yet, right? And you could do that for the rest of your life with one piece of copy, and it will never be perfect because nothing's ever perfect, especially because you can't perfect something And the word perfection is kind of, but you can't get something like ideal until you even know how your audience experiences it. And you can't do that till you put it out there. So for you to be able to actually get things to more of an ideal place, it's essential that you're putting it out there. So perfectionism doesn't exist. It just doesn't. And if you're noticing it in yourself, it may mean that fear is beneath it. And fear of putting yourself out there is keeping you from actually doing it. Last but not least, another way fear can show up is undervaluing yourself. And a big way that this shows up for ADHD women is charging too little for your services or product. Some of this can directly be tied to imposter syndrome and the fear that people will be like, what does she think she is to charge that much for coaching or for that much for her program? And that's a real fear. This is one that I will sometimes feel. I don't feel imposter syndrome in terms of like, I know what I'm doing. I know what I offer is really good. However, sometimes I'll feel that fear of pricing my things in a way that is balancing the energy. And that can be another way that fear gets in the way in our business, because when we do that, it's not an even energy exchange. So number one, the people in our programs may not be working very hard because their investment was low. And number two, we're not valuing ourselves. And so that can lead us to stop putting in as much effort or put off putting ourselves out there because it's like, whatever, I'm not going to get that much anyway, right? And so we want to make sure that we're being really intentional about how we are valuing ourselves and our services. And if you're struggling with that, again, fear may be the thing. So we've talked about these different ways that fear shows up, but we haven't yet talked about what to do about it. And we're going to talk about what to do about it in a free 3-part live virtual training that starts August 1st, 2024. So we're going to discover how to overcome these invisible ADHD obstacles so you can build prosperous and meaningful business you love. We'll unpack more about what this looks like and some of the other ways that invisible obstacles show up, what they are, besides just fear, how they show up. And we'll talk more in depth about my strategy. I have a special process that I offer that blends IFS with some other techniques. IFS is internal family systems. I'll come back to that. But it blends IFS with some other therapeutic techniques to help you work with some of these underlying invisible obstacles that are getting in the way. And we'll also unpack what else you need to do to build your business to work, to live the ADHD way. If this sounds good to you, you can register now. I am just opening up registration this week. So you can register now. The link is in the show notes to join me live for the 3-part live of how to overcome invisible ADHD obstacles so you can build a prosperous, meaningful business you love. I said I'd come back to IFS, and I'll say that real quick. IFS is internal family systems. It is a lovely approach that really honors all the parts of us. And so while you may feel the fear, there's actually a part of you that's holding the fear, and that part of you is protecting you by holding that fear. And the thing about IFS is it's not about pushing down, pushing away, getting rid of. It's more about leaning into, being curious, and working with. So it's a lovely way to work with ourselves and heal and grow, both so we can enjoy our lives, but also so that we can thrive in our business. So if this all sounds great to you, I'd love for you to register today using the link in the show note to join me for how to overcome invisible ADHD obstacles so you can build a prosperous, meaningful business you love. If you're not following the Self-Love Woman Way podcast, be sure to follow, and I'd love it if you'd share. Take care.